Okay, this is video number 2. We're going to focus on the heart. So in addition to understanding how the electrocardiograph works to produce an electrocardiogram, we have to now look at the heart and where this electrical activity was coming from. So if we look at the heart and draw a rough representation of the heart, what we have here is the heart and its chambers, the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. Now the heart's electrical activity is going to start in the right atrium up here in the corner, and a collection of cells called the SA node or the sinoatrial node. And this collection of cells is just the fastest to depolarize in the heart. All the cells in the heart will depolarize, but because they're the fastest to depolarize, all the cells then will follow this. So these are considered the pacemaker cells. And they will depolarize roughly between 60 and 100 beats per minute. Now once the SA node fires, that electrical activity travels through the atrium only, the right atrium, all the way to the left atrium like this, and produces what we call a wave of depolarization. And then how that would show up on the ECG was the ECG would, or the electrocardiograph, would basically look at the sum of that. And so what we're looking at is the sum of that electrical activity going in this general direction, like so. Now, that electrical activity, in order to get into the ventricles, has to enter a collection of cells here at the bottom of the right atrium called the AV node. All right, that's the atrioventricular node. It's between the atria and the ventricles. Now, even if there was no electrical activity from the SA node, the AV node could fire on its own, and it would fire somewhere between 40 and 60 beats per minute. But normally, the AV node would collect the electrical activity, and then what it's going to do is it's going to pass it to the ventricles. Now, the way in which it does this is first, it goes into a set of conduction wires that we call the bundle of His. And this bundle is going to take that electrical activity. It will then branch off. So this bundle will branch, and those bundle branches will go to the left and to the right ventricle. So we have a left and a right bundle branch. And then off of those bundle branches, we have little fibers, right? And these are like the prongs of an electrical outlet where the electrical activity comes off. And we call these Purkinje fibers. And so that electrical activity will finally enter the ventricles, and it will depolarize the ventricles. Now that electrical activity will go to both ventricles. However, the overall electrical activity for the ventricles is in this direction. And so you get a very large vector or very large depolarization that shows up on the electrocardiogram going in this direction. Because the left ventricle is much larger than the right ventricle, it goes in towards the left ventricle. So again, your depolarization will start, sorry about that, will start in the SA node, go to the AV node, the bundle of His, the left bundle branch and the right bundle branch, and then finally Purkinje fibers and to the right and left ventricles for depolarization. All right, so that's the normal flow, the normal conduction system of the heart. So if we take another look at this and we just focused at the top, again, you have the SA node, and the SA node fires, and the cells around it depolarize, and the cells around that depolarize, and that depolarization spreads to the left atrium. And again, that gives you an overall depolarization going in this direction. Now let's put our electrodes on the surface of the skin. We have a negative electrode here and a positive electrode here. So those electrodes would pick up that electrical activity in the heart. And if you looked at your electrocardiogram, what you would see is this. This wave here is called a P wave, and your P wave represents atrial depolarization. So when those atria depolarize and there's electrical activity crossing the atria, you'll get a small wave we call the P wave. Now, remember that electrical activity will enter the AV node, go down the bundle of His, the right and left bundle branches, and then you'll have Purkinje fibers come off of that, and those Purkinje fibers will then allow electrical activity to hit the ventricles. And the ventricles will depolarize in this general direction, and they're much larger, so that's a much larger amount of electrical activity. So again, if you notice that this arrow is going towards the positive electrode, and because it's going toward the positive electrode, what we end up getting is this very large upward deflection. The P wave was small electrical activity, essentially going away from the negative toward the positive, so it was a small upright wave. The ventricular depolarization was fairly large because it's a larger muscle tissue. It's going towards the positive electrode, so you get a very big upward deflection. We'll talk about these other parts later. And so we call this the QRS complex. And the QRS complex then represents ventricular depolarization. Now it's assumed anytime the muscle tissue depolarizes, it contracts and you actually get pumping of the heart. Now, if any tissue depolarizes, it must repolarize if you want to start a new cardiac cycle or you want the heart to beat again. So here's our ECG with our P wave, atria depolarized, then the ventricles depolarized, QRS complex, and then we have this. This is our T wave. So our T wave represents the ventricles repolarizing. So we have ventricular repolarization. So it's important that the ventricles repolarize so that they can depolarize again. What we do not see on the ECG is where the atria repolarize. They obviously do repolarize, we just don't see it. Okay? So, your heart normally will start depolarization at the SA node at 60 to 100 beats per minute. And so that wave of depolarization goes across the atria, and that gives you a P wave. And then it will enter the AV node, down the bundle of His, the right and left bundle branch, out the Purkinje fibers, give you a wave of depolarization across the ventricles, still going towards the positive electrode that we have here, giving you a very large QRS complex. And then everything will repolarize, and so you get the T wave, which is ventricular repolarization. If the SA node did not fire, the AV node could fire on its own at a rate of 40 to 60 beats per minute. And one thing I didn't mention, if both the SA node and AV node did not fire, the ventricles themselves will fire, and the ventricles, your ventricular rate, if they were to fire on themselves, is a very slow 20 to 40 beats per minute. So if everything fails, if the SA node fails, the AV node fails, the ventricles will still beat to keep you alive, just at a very slow 20 to 40 beats per minute. All right, that's the end of video 2. Video 3 will cover heart rate.